This happened in Portugal in the 14th century. In 1839, the heir to the throne, the son of King Afonso IV, married Princess Constance of Castile at his father's insistence. The marriage was dictated by political motives and dynastic goals. The Infante harbored no tender feelings for his wife. A large retinue arrived in Lisbon with her, including the noble Castilian lady-in-waiting, Ines de Castro. The future King of Portugal fell in love with her at first sight, and she reciprocated his feelings. 7 years after the wedding, Pedro's wife died in childbirth. From then on, he no longer considered it necessary to conceal his relationship with Ines. Pedro moved her into the palace and announced his intention to marry her. King Afonso could not allow this. Ines came from a Castilian noble family whose members supported the return of Portugal to Castilian rule. The Ines brothers were involved in the political intrigues of the Castilian court, and the Portuguese nobility feared their influence over Pedro. This could lead to another war with the neighboring state. They tried to eliminate Ines by any means necessary, sometimes with expensive gifts, sometimes with dismissals, sometimes with threats. But the lovers' feelings for each other only grew stronger over time. Ines bore the Infante 4 children, and the king's advisors feared that sooner or later they would lay claim to the throne, potentially sparking a civil war in the country. All these events took place during a time of palace intrigue. The prince's father was losing the support of the nobility, and his position on the throne was becoming precarious. In contrast, the Ines family was gaining enormous influence in high society. Furthermore, King Afonso IV and his entourage feared that Ines' sons would attempt to challenge the rightful heir, Ferdinand, and thus plunge the country into fratricidal war. At the same time, Ines's brothers urged Dom Pedro to join the struggle for the Castilian throne, which also inevitably threatened war with Castile and frightened King Afonso IV. The king unsuccessfully attempted to marry the Infante several times, but he refused. Then the royal council decided to kill Ines de Castro. One day, when Dom Pedro was absent, the king went to see Ines de Castro at the palace of Santa Clara, but, according to legend, moved by the sight of the unfortunate woman, who threw herself at his feet with her children, begging for mercy, he hesitated to carry out his cruel plan. However, the king's advisors managed to secure permission to carry out the execution, and on January 7th, 1855, Afonso sent 3 men to Ines, who beheaded her in front of her young children. Enraged, Pedro rebelled against his father, ordered Ines's body embalmed, buried in a tomb in the city of Coimbra, raised an army, and plunged the country into a protracted civil war, which ended, at the demand of the nobility, with a reconciliation. Soon after, Afonso died, and Pedro ascended the throne in 1857 and began searching for Ines's killers. In 1860, he secured the extradition of 2 of them from Castile in exchange for Castilian prisoners. Ultimately, Pero Coelho and Álvaro Goncalves were found guilty of Ines's murder, and Pedro personally cut out the hearts of each. The third assassin, Diogo López Pacheco, managed to escape execution and died in Castile in 1383. The following year, Pedro, according to legend, gathered nobles in the palace and swore to them that he had married Ines. After this, her embalmed corpse was transported from Coimbra, dressed in royal robes, and seated on the throne. A crown was placed on her head, and all the courtiers were required to render royal honors to the dead favorite and kiss the hem of her dress. Pedro stood by the throne with a drawn sword, meticulously ensuring that all the courtiers performed the required ritual correctly. She was then buried with extreme pomp in the royal tomb. There is no compelling evidence to support this. However, it is known that Pedro deliberately constructed 2 tombs in the monastery in the town of Alcobaça, one for himself and one for Ines, opposite each other, so that he could see his queen before the Last Judgment. The marble of the tombs bears the inscription, "Until the end of the world."